Division Supervisor John McDuffy. He's here in Division Lima on the northeast corner of things, trying to wrap things up. One of the things that we noticed here is there's a lot of treatment areas, which means thinning prescribed fire. And we'll just have a little conversation with John, who's been on night shift, and he's trying to get to bed. So try to keep this brief. Okay. So, John, just tell me a few things, like how long you been here?
This is day 11 now. 11, 12. I have 3 more shifts yet. Yeah, so it's 11. Night shifts, so it's a little fatiguing after days start piling up.
Yeah. Never everyone's favorite time is night shift. It's not glorious, but some of the fire effects at night are pretty interesting to watch.
Not only watch, it's a kind of, if we're going to do a prescribed fire in late July and early August, and in a historically fire adapted ecosystem, then it's best to do it at night. We'll get the best effects out of it, and not only for the forest but for containment purposes too, so we don't have a runaway fire. But yeah, it's often the case now that we try and burn at night when relative humidity is up and temperatures are down and winds are shifting, so it makes containment a lot easier and doesn't kill our trees while we pass some fire under the overstory. I think a few days before we got here, I think we were about 5 miles away on it, and we were looking for ways to contain this fire. And predominantly at night, we were saying we'll go direct because of moderated fire effects and the ability to do that. And as we saw fire growth exponentially outpacing us in our efforts at night through the following days, started bringing up like maybe we should be looking at fuels treatments to the north, because we had John Ivy, a local guy here, that had been working on those fuels treatments, though we were still 5 miles away. But fast forward a few days and we're there then. So they worked. There's good effects in there. It's a perfect opportunity to put fire in that area. They just weren't big enough. So by the time we didn't have a box around the fire of fuels treatments to put it in at landscape level. So after it burns through a few hundred acres, it pushes out in other areas and spots over into, this time again, into the lumberland there. So, and continues to march northwest.
Okay, so yeah, once again, I'm here with John McDuffy. He brings a wealth of fire suppression, aviation, and fuels experience. Before we continue on, just give us a little background on some of your fire experience.
I started 21 years ago, and one of probably the few that I actually started on a hotshot crew. And it was more than I thought I could handle at the time. I completed the season, and it was a banner season that changed probably fire suppression history in the Bitterroot National Forest in 2000. But
what shot crew were you on?
Heber hotshot crew out of Arizona. Now it's Black Mesa. A lot of great experiences there, and I didn't think I'd be back, but at the time a foreman, now the Fire and Aviation chief for the Fish and Wildlife, he was Chris Wilcox then, said, he's like, you'll know if you'll be back. Give it a few months, and bad memories fade of how hot you were, how cold you were, how tired you were, and come February you'll just remember the fire landscape at night and the camaraderie with the people in the back of the buggy and hiking up the hill and working through the night and seeing that the sunrise and the smoke and the inversions. He's like, then you'll be back. And it took a couple of years, but he was right. I was back, and I've tried to leave a couple other times since then, but I keep getting sucked back.
I know there's a motto, for 1 year or for a career.
Yeah. No, I've tried other things. I think it is going to be the career, for better or worse. But there's always opportunity to learn and grow and do things, and not a lot of other jobs give you the opportunity to always be learning new stuff constantly if you have the desire and the aptitude to do it.
Mm-hmm. And then, you moved on. Tell us about your progression. What are some of the other outfits or that you've worked for, or crews?
Yeah, after a year off, I came back again and talked to some friends and came back to a different hotshot crew that was just getting started in New Mexico, Mount Taylor, and stayed a couple of years with them and had an opportunity to go back to graduate school. So I took that for a short time and switched over to an engine and had a great, really fun time learning something new there. But kind of bagged that for a little bit and jumped ship and moved up to Washington State from New Mexico and went to the work for the FAIR program for the Prescribed Fire Pacific Northwest Research Group. So FAIR is the fire research and fire environmental research applications team. So they've created like the photo series and Consume. They do a lot of smoke modeling. So on and off worked with them for eight winters. So it was my winter gig with them, and then I fought fire in the summer. And up there in Washington, I ended up falling into a group of guys and got on an engine there and moved over to Boise after a couple of years there and jumped out of Boise for a few years and took a job in Joshua Tree National Park as a captain for a couple. And come 2011, I kind of just tried my own thing. I ended up on a fishing boat up north of the Arctic Circle and working for Doctors Without Borders in Africa. And after I got sick, I ended up coming back, and I'm like, well, I think I'll go back to fire now.
So some of your route took you from a hotshot to an engine to fire research and then a smoke jumper.
Jumping, out of Boise a really unique time there, and something that was definitely showed me what I was made of. I guess tested me to a different limit, and I still made it. I made some of my best friends that I made through rookie training. Then I never even been on a fire with them, and yet we're in contact every week from back in 2007. So,
that's interesting. Then from smoke jumper to fishing boats to Doctors Without Borders. Man, John, you got a great story to tell. I'm glad we sat down. Love the background. Love what you're doing out here. But one of the things we want to focus on, or just bring to attention, what I feel strongly about, and I know you do as well, is treatment areas, which are can you explain treatment areas and how large fires react to a fuels treated area?
Yeah, I'll answer that quick and then give you some background. Like where I got to this point is treatment areas are taking an ecosystem, a fire-adapted ecosystem oftentimes here, which was one of the largest in the nation at one time, was the Ponderosa pine stand that is so used to having fire in it and depends on fire to regenerate itself. And a lot of that's been logged over the last 100 years, but as we restore a lot of our forested lands and entering fire back into that is crucial to not only the providing resiliency for the future, but it's what is dependent on there, and we forget like there are just natural disturbances that shape our forests that keep it healthy. And smoke isn't bad, though Smokey Bear a long time ago taught us that, put it all out. And so we have a century of successful propaganda of putting fires out, and in the might of our government to put it out at the time for what they thought was the right thing to do to save some trees and keep fires out of there. They just saw destruction at the time. They didn't see the balance that it provided. Several years ago I switched over to more of a fuel-centric job in the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest. And it was 2 years ago, after doing some burns there, that I realized that the effects that I was anticipating weren't the effects that I was getting when I'm putting fire on the ground. And it's kind of shocking the amount of mortality that I was seeing out of the trees. And then just a year passed, and then I saw some more beetle outbreaks and some dead trees in the area. And then we did another prescribed fire, and I knew something was wrong, so I reached out to a bunch of researchers and fire ecologists and to past practitioners in that area to come and do some field trips with me and tell me what they have done in the past, what they expected to be done, and what they were accomplishing with what they had. And I got Paul Hesberg to come out and do a field trip with us and give us a better idea on what long-term level we were looking at, and what we're doing, what we were doing now, was it going to be effective in the future? And I talked to some climatologists and some weather experts at NOAA in terms of drought effects, and we hear drought a lot now in the media and the news. And took a little while to compile some of that data, but gave me a lot of stuff back on really the West, as everybody knows, the record heat waves and drought, and this might be a banner year. We're not even halfway through yet, but it's been happening for a while, and it's really been happening a lot in the last 20 years, where they're calling it a hot drought. It's not so much that we have a lack of water in all areas, many do, but it's that the warmer temperatures are increasing the evapotranspiration of the trees and vegetation and pulling that moisture out of the soil sooner. And the precipit's coming more as rain and runoff as opposed to snowpack to help recharge some aquifers. So we're getting drier and hotter, and we have denser forests that have been suppressed or logged, and we have beetle outbreaks and overstock of young trees, and we've for the most part removed a natural occurring element of that, which was fire, that regulated all these things through those natural cycles over thousands of years. So putting that back into play is a little more tricky than just a conventional thin the trees, prune them, pile them, burn them, and underburn, and expect we've reversed 100 years in 3. So I started to dive a lot more into fire ecology, fire effects, fuels, and ecosystem restoration, not just conventional Forest Service. I don't like to call it hazardous fuels. I go, they're fuels for sure, but yeah, we have a long way to go to kind of reverse where we were at, and the future is not what the past was. We can use it as a reference, but the future is going to be very different, and carrying capacity of a lot of these lands will be very different for these trees. So for me, I think it's really interesting to study it and to know what I'm doing on the ground, and to try and make a difference and make that shift. And I think as a nation, and the talk that's going on in Congress and Senate now, that we could see a huge shift with the Prescribed Fire Act of 2021 to really make some big changes and use some new technologies out there and utilize some of the tools that the government's given us to help alleviate or get around some of the constraints that we have within our agency. I often talk about there are factors that kind of dictate how we work. There are natural disturbances, and then there are constraints. And disturbances are fires or beetles, drought, things like that. And constraints are like our burn plans or budgets for bringing people on, or weather windows to work. Well, that would be a natural, but the constraints would be NEPA or smoke, that we don't want to put X amount of tons of smoke up in the air near populations. So it's finding that middle ground that you can find these balances and overcome these hurdles to put fire on the ground and not put tons of smoke in the air, and to realize that the fire and fire interaction is really important. Multiple times putting it in at low levels at times until you build that. We always talk about in our agency building resiliency. Well, it's the same thing in a forest. You have to build that up, and it's going to take a number of years to get there.
So just talking with John McDuffy, a fuels expert here in I mean, closest to an expert. You study it, you live it, this is your life, your job, and your passion. So I guess more elaboration on what we saw here when the fuels kind of bumped these large treated areas, and we saw it on the Millie Fire, which was in Central Oregon a few years ago. It basically hit a treated area, and the intensity of fire really decreased. So, I guess what have you seen up there on Lima?
Not only did it decrease, when you have treatment areas there, oftentimes they're put in place to identify where you can hold a fire out of, and fuels treatments and prescribed fire should be in line with suppression. And if you can build your boxes big enough, then you can say, like, we can treat roads and ridges to hold wildfire at bay, but we can treat south slopes and do silvicultural treatments on north slopes within these large boundary areas that will coincide with ecosystem restoration and WWDIS wildfire decision making. That if you treated a box and you've treated south slopes and you have a natural occurrence in areas that you haven't gotten to yet, then you have the ability to think about how you're going to go at that with less risk, with less resource damage and stuff, and maybe it's just using new technology like drones to backburn north slopes at night, and to get those fire effects that you want, and to keep large fires from doing stand replacing damage to forests that aren't used to that and have a tough time regenerating from it. So here on this fire, it was already known that they had fuels treatments because of the local personnel that we were working with, and we knew to get there ahead of time, and a little bit of prep might be needed, but to hold that area in that box and keep it from pushing down into the Nature Conservancy land and their buildings there, that we were able to burn them at night and with great effects, and easily hold it with minimum amount of people. So it's part of the decision-making process in wildfire to look for the prescribed fire aspect in it. So they work hand in hand, and sometimes they're not competing by any means. So hopefully if we change our mindset more to put more thought into our prescribed fire plans and how they can help our suppression efforts, not to stop fire, but to make it manageable for the communities and the forests surrounding.
Yeah, this is great info. I know this conversation could probably go on for hours. Yeah. So I just want to thank John. Thank you for your time. I know you got to get some sleep and get up and do it again a few more times. So yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for the insight. This is really rich information that I feel passionate about too. We should be sharing this and how we can get a handle on these mega fires that we're seeing, and what is the preventative measure here. And it sounds like that's what you are working on, in terms of not only addressing it here on these fires, but also addressing it on a national level.
Yeah, it's national. It's not just for local level stuff. Like it's in cases that we may see this year. It's literally to save large tracts of forested land in the country that may not be able to recover from a large drought or a large wildfire area that could sterilize the soil. Like they're used to fire, but they're used to a lot of low intensity fire for a big ponderosa pine stand and some mixed conifers. So maybe this fire season, with all that's happened and even last, will bring more attention to that, so we can introduce that in a more effective manner and save large tracts of wilderness and biodiversity that's disappearing through these large tracts, seeing more intense fire than it would historically be seen.
Okay. Well, once again, thanks for your time. I'm going to end this conversation with a traditional smoke jumper salute, which is a high five.
There you go, brother. Good deal.